What up? It's Golden Spaces, an Odyssey original podcast with Justin and Nat. I am your girl, Nat, and I am here with Justin. So, Justin, we got some pushback about only doing the show once a week. So, I appreciate y'all wanting to hear from us more. But right now, it's what we can manage. So appreciate the patience. I'm sure as things heat up around free agency or if the Warriors make a lot of moves, we can increase the frequency around that time. But if there's just not enough Warriors stuff happening right now that we can really be on
Right.
that many times. But we probably are due to get a mailbag going and ask y'all some questions. So we'll work that in at some point. If y'all have questions, but hopefully we're answering some of them as we do these shows. So thank you for sticking with us and appreciate your patience. As we still figure things out, y'all are growing with us as we're growing. But yeah, no, right now we are on a once a week frequency. So I just wanted to clarify that. But we love y'all. We do and appreciate the support and hope you continue to support with those 5-star ratings and by downloading and by also leaving favorable reviews. Y'all feel me, right? Thank you. Okay. So, Justin, before we get into the NBA finals and react to what happens, um, a report came out from The Athletic. Anthony Slater's The Athletic. We all know Anthony Slater. And there was a lot of information in there. But the notable part for me about what his reporting was that the Warriors are not actively shopping Poole, which, by the way, when teams say that, I don't actually believe it. But
Mhm.
that the Warriors are not actively shopping Jordan Poole. But also no one is safe, like except for Stephen Curry, which I think we all know that. That's like not really rocket science. I think, if you
Right.
if you have sense, everyone knows that truly. Like we understand that some players may be safer than others, but I think people think the core three are like all on the same level with Steph, and they're not. It's really Steph.
Right.
Then maybe like Dre and Clay, then like some next levels, but truly Steph is the only person who is safe. So yeah, so unless he asks for a trade,
Right.
so which we don't have any reason to believe he's going to do. There's also been some reporting that Steph wants to run it back, at least one more time with this core. Um I wonder who he considers the core, though. I'm making the assumption right now that includes Jordan Poole by some of the other commentary that he's also said and made. But to me, the question still remains, Justin, after, Draymond comes out and he's doing all this talking and he says like, yeah, that situation affected the team dynamics, and Steve Kerr acknowledges it. What magically is going to happen between now and the start of the season that's going to change that? And that, by the way, that was only one dynamic that was an issue, but there's also Steve Kerr basically doubling down on his like beliefs about young players and playing time, right? The thing that was an issue, and him basically being like, yeah, well, stop complaining. So like, how are these the chemistry issues
Mhm.
that impacted Golden State, right? And we ain't even get into yet Klay Thompson and Dre's selfishness and other stuff throughout the year, but like, how, right now I'm not seeing the signs of those things working towards resolution. So I'm just trying to understand what is going on with the Warriors, Justin.
I think it's a lot of smoke going around. A lot of like trying to keep people guessing, not really showing their hand, and trying to make it seem like everything's gonna be all fine and dandy. Um, which it could end up being that, but I just think it's a lot of trying to throw people off right now. It's saying things that sound good. Uh, but yeah.
I mean, I want to make very clear that I actually would love for them to find a path to keeping Jordan Poole, right? I think you and I both believe he still has a lot of potential, um, and can be a really, really very good player in this league in the future. Obviously, there's some things that he has to do for his game, but like, yeah, for me, the question is not like I just Jordan had a he had a up and down season and a not great postseason. He's also a young developing player. That happens, and he also had some added circumstances, right? So it happens, and it sucked that it happened, and it happened at the worst possible time, but it happens. But I haven't like given up on him. I
Right.
haven't given up on him, and so but I don't feel like those things, if you're just because I mean, Clay has had bad postseasons and playoff runs, right? Like, that's not it may be not as bad as Jordan, but he's had them, right? Like, so it's not unique to Jordan. It may get overlooked with Clay because the Warriors still won, but I just don't know how they get past this whole Draymond thing. Like, I don't see how that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think not only do they need to get beyond it as far as professionals, but I do think they need to have some level of even a friendship again for things to go the way it needs to go for them to win a championship. Like you look at the teams of, even last year's team, this year's Nuggets, the Bucks from a few years ago. These teams genuinely like each other. It's hard to win and go through all the things you need to go through
When you don't like your teammates.
when you don't like your teammates or when you just tolerate your teammates. You got to like actually be cool with them. I feel
And
like I don't
fuck
think,
with them.
yeah, like I don't think you got to be buddy buddy, hang out all the time, but you cannot be like we just coworkers. Like that definitely can't be a thing. Even if you aren't actively going to work every day and getting into it with this person, if you just existing next to that person, I just feel like it's not going to really mesh towards a championship, especially two players that mean as much as they mean to this team in their roles. They're so important to this team. Everybody has to be on one accord, and I just don't think it's likely that that happens for those two again. So something's got to give, right?
Yeah. And then there's also where there's not like an actual beef, but there's also the natural friction between Jordan and Clay, right? Which
Mhm.
I think is a little bit maybe more pronounced than the low key one between Kaminga and I don't know who you want to call it. Is
Steve.
it is it who?
Steve.
Steve. But also positionally, is it Andrew Wiggins? You know what I'm saying? Like um, but I say it because I think I think, and I know there's been some conversations, but I think you can't really justify like a Kaminga coming in over Andrew Wiggins or even Draymond. But there's a case to be made for Jordan Poole to start.
Mhm.
Right? Like, I would still go with Clay, and I think Clay is the better person to start, so that's what it will be. But there's a case to be made for Jordan to start. That's not a completely crazy one, and so I think there's a natural, um, just friction there, due to, like, where Clay is and then also where Jordan is, and it's not wrong for Jordan to want to start. I think it's always been framed like he's selfish for wanting that. I don't think that's selfish, to be honest. I don't.
No, it's like it's natural. It's like he wants like you. I mean, every basketball player wants to start. Like no matter what level you are, no matter how good of a player you are, every basketball player wants to start. So when you actually have the talent to be able to do that, and you've been a part of a team that wins, even with you starting, then obviously he's gonna have those feelings. And yeah, I mean it's just they play the same position mostly, right? Jordan's combo guard, Clay's more of like just a wing, but yeah, there's just some natural non confrontational friction there for sure.
Yeah, and and I just think I could easily see me being like from a younger person's perspective, right? Like watching like they criticized me for this shit and these dudes be doing the same shit. They don't be always doing what they need to do on defense, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. And I get it. There's a grace that's given to them because of all they've done. And, but it's also like, it's like your parents telling you, like, do this, but then as an example, they're doing something different. At some point, that message can get lost if you're not like setting the example, right? So to me, it's sort of like, I mean, maybe not as extreme, but it's like, when the Heat used to always yell at Mario Chalmers, and sometimes it would not even be him, man. It would be like Dwayne Wade or LeBron's mistake, but it's like, we just gonna go at Mario Chalmers. You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, not everything is like just me fucking up.
Right. And that for sure is definitely gonna like create some level of just discontent right there. And I do think that type of stuff is led to up and down play, you know what I mean? Like just ups, like highs and lows, and how he's going out there in the court and how he, approaches everything. So they just gotta figure it out. But I don't think, like you said, I don't think the path for them figuring it out is a very likely one. So, something they got to do something about it, which likely involves somebody getting moved.
So will Jordan Poole be on the team to start the season?
I think so.
So if a trade comes, you think it's happening in season?
I think the likelihood of a trade happening next offseason is the highest. The likelihood of a trade happening this offseason, second highest. Mid of next season, the third most likely. So I think he probably starts
Third as in most likely to happen, or third as in least likely?
Least likely to happen. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I see it.
So if you don't think the trade is happening until next offseason, you think they running it back, and like,
I think money wise.
So then how they gonna win a championship next year, Justin? If we
they're
say
gonna be
we
a
don't
better
think
team.
that they can work through all of this, how they winning?
I think they're going to be a better team overall. Maybe, I mean, it's possible, but it's just
What's possible
for them to win a championship. Still, I just think it's very hard for them to do it if Jordan and Draymond are not at that level. So we're gonna see. I just think money wise, it makes, at least from the ownership's point of view, it would make more sense to put all that stuff off, like put all the team changing stuff off, unless they're like, this deal that we have in front of us makes perfect sense. It's going to set us up for the next few years after this one as well. And we think it's going to give us the best chance to win the championship. And Steph is like signing off on it too. I think if that happens, this off season, something big will happen. But if it's not that, they're going to ride it out the whole season, I think, and make a deal or do something next season, because Clay's contract is also up. So at that point, they'll be able to say, okay, we can move off of somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Jordan. They have the choice at that point.
That would concern me.
If they did that it would concern you for next season or for the future of the team?
For next season, if they don't make, because I think we're in agreement that they didn't have to make significant moves in terms of talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the talent does not matter if the harmony is not there.
For
and
sure.
So yes, that would concern me.
Yeah, it would probably concern me too. I would just ultimately have to see what the product on the court is, and if they still look disconnected and all type of stuff, then it's definitely concerning. Like I said, it's not out of the realm of possibility that him and Draymond can work through their differences and actually, get back on the terms needed for them to have that harmony. I just don't think it's likely. So that's where the concern comes from. But
yeah,
I don't think it's impossible. Yeah, I mean, I don't think
my therapist would say, Natalie, anything is possible. Yeah, I don't think it's possible.
It might not be.
I don't know, Justin, but I think we should move to the Nuggets. But now I feel like you were, based on what you just said, like we kind of, giving credence to the Nuggets or the next dynasty hype.
See, with the whole dynasty talk, at least get 2 before you talk dynasty, in my opinion. Like if you get 2, I think 3 or more makes a dynasty, right? I think that's the general rule, 3 or more.
And within a certain period of time.
Within a certain period of time. I mean, people say the Spurs had a dynasty. They won 5 titles over like a 16-year span, 15-year span. I don't know if that's a dynasty, but
it is over a long span, but there wasn't like there's
their first 4 were within 8 years, I think 9 years, 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, the time in between them wasn't like so crazy. So
that's true. So yeah, I would say the Spurs are definitely a dynasty. But as far as the Nuggets, you have to win your second one before people start talking dynasty. For one, for two, unless you are like the Spurs, where you've just been consistent. Like Tim Duncan as a rookie won a chip, right? Maybe second year.
Yeah.
Like Jokic is like a few years from 30. You know what I mean? Like either your team has to be close to unbeatable while all your guys are in your prime, like the Warriors were, or like the Shaq and Kobe Lakers were, or like the Michael Jordan and the Michael Jordan Bulls were, or you have to spread it out like the Spurs did, where like your franchise player started young winning chips, and then like over the course of his entire career, he just won a chip every now and then, kept racking up chips. I don't see either of those paths for Denver. I quite frankly don't think they are that good anyway. So the dynasty talk is funny to me, but if they get the 2, then we could talk about
it. Okay, I have so many thoughts, but I'm still actually processing what you said about the team possibly not making the changes needed, because this is a situation where I would love to be proven wrong, right? Because I ultimately want Jordan to stay, but
all logic points to it not going that well, for sure.
I would be very concerned about the Warriors' ability to do something next year if something big doesn't happen. So I've already said that now a few times.
From a non-talent perspective, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's take it back a little bit. The Warriors, the Nuggets won the NBA Finals last night. They beat the Miami Heat 4-1. Justin predicted that. I think you said 5, right? Didn't you have Nuggets in 5? I still actually think the Heat should have won at least one more game in that series. So, but I I don't even think I really want to spend that much time on the Jimmy Butler stuff, though I did see you tweeting about it. I do think people are going a little bit too far, but I also think people were taking it a little bit too far as well. Like when he was playing well with the agendas. Like to me, I just remain where I always was on Jimmy. He's not your number one. He's not that guy, in my opinion. I do believe that his injury, even though people don't love to talk about injuries or don't like it, and I do think the ankle affected him. Like seriously, I do. But I don't think that they would have won. I think that's the difference in the series being a 6 or a 7-game series versus it being the difference in winning. And even if they had Tyler Hero, I still don't think it's a difference in winning. And that's largely due to the fact that the Denver Nuggets had the best player in the series. And I often lean to the team that has the best player in the series when it's like when it's a significant difference, right?
Mhm.
Whereas I think in the Celtics series, I still would say that Tatum is probably the better player or more talented player, but I think the difference between him and Jimmy are probably negligible right now at this stage of their careers. So that's when a series can go either way, right? But
Mhm.
when they're, in my opinion,
I
but
agree.
when there's a gap like Steph to Tatum or a gap like Jokic to
To Jimmy.
Jimmy, you know, Steph to De'Aaron Fox, right? When there's that difference in the gap, I'm gonna always lean on the team that has the best player in the series. And not only was Jokic the best player in the series, but many believe and say he's the best player in the world. I'm not gonna fight anyone on that. I actually am much more comfortable with that than I was with the crowning Giannis the best player after he won, if I'm being honest.
Mhm.
Um, and but he's a tier one guy. He's a top guy. So not just the better player in the series, but he's one of them ones. And so
Mhm.
I just I don't think there was a path really ever to the Heat winning besides maybe like some kind of substantial injury occurring for the Nuggets. So yeah, but so I will acknowledge that Jimmy Butler was compromised and he did the whole like ankle was fine, we just lost. He did all that. I still think the way people act around that in sports is stupid. I'm always gonna think that. But that being said, I still also think he's a very good player. There's times where he can be a great player. I just don't think he can sustain that, like, the way that the greats really do. And so he's just, he's a notch below those guys.
Mhm.
And that's okay. You're still an incredible NBA player, but um, I think you need another guy. I think you need a more official number two. Um, and Bam played well actually in the finals. So, but Jimmy didn't for a variety of reasons, and they needed Jimmy to be the Jimmy who was playing the way he was earlier in the season for them to even have like a chance.
Yeah. I think he's one of those. He's probably bottom of the top 10 type of guy, which the gap between the top of the top 10 and the bottom is Grand Canyon, right? Like once you get off of the Jokic, Steph, um, Giannis, really those three, I think Jokic and Steph are better than Giannis, but after Giannis, I think it's a noticeable gap between the next few. Whether you say Luca, Embiid, KD, those people are in that group, and then after that, you get to like the Jimmys, the Dames that are kind of the John Morants that are kind of like fringe top 10. That gap is pretty huge as well. So imagine Jokic to Jimmy is just not even close. So definitely didn't expect him to win. Um, the thing with Jimmy, I think he can be your best player on a title team, right? Because I mean, he's gotten to the finals multiple times. He's just run into guys that are just way better than he is, or better, clearly better than him. But I don't think he can be your best scorer on a title team just because his game is so predicated on him being in peak physical shape, or at least peaking physically, right? No injuries, anything like that. So if he has any injury or anything, he's probably not going to be able to put multiple good games together in a row. So that's just not really, at least scoring wise, that's just not really going to be, a recipe for winning a championship. So, yeah, I mean, I think overall, you look at his playoff run and his playoff runs in the past, and I'd say he's a pretty good player. All the Hemi Butler stuff, and I think that stuff was more like a meme than anything. I don't think people seriously thought he was Michael Jordan's son or like that level
No,
player.
but including on our own show, Brother from Another, like people just like, if anybody I'm gonna go to battle with, it's like Jimmy Butler and like and when like people like me made like skeptical faces, it's like, come on. Like, I mean, there's a lot of other players I would go to battle with for Jimmy Butler. And it's like, yeah, it's like, he has just lost to players who are better than him in the finals, but that is sort of my point. It's just like, and also, again, I mean, it's going to feel like we're discrediting, but there were definitely things that aided those 2 runs to the finals, like that put the Heat in a good situation to make those runs. Um, so it's like, because like in my opinion, the Celtics should have won their series, and like while I give the Heat a lot of credit because Giannis came back and he was there, but it's like if you really just had like a fully healthy Giannis from the beginning, do the Heat actually win that series? Probably not. So that's what I'm saying. There's just things that helped it. But regardless, the Heat, it would be interesting to see what they do. I heard like Kyrie's name floated today. I don't think that would be a good move for them. But and I don't know if you can actually ever get Dame to get traded or whatever, but I think Dame is the other name I've heard, which I think would be better. Um, Someone said like Bradley Beal, and I actually don't like that at all. But
Yeah.
So anyway, uh, we can pivot to the Nuggets and see, but that's where I land on the Heat. All right, Justin. So we talked about the Miami Heat and your boy Jimmy Buckets, playoff Jimmy, Himmy, the Butler, but we're gonna retire all the names because sorry. And we gave the losers some attention, and I have no ill will towards the Heat. Got a lot of family, people from South Florida. I lived there for a number of years. I got roots there. So, I wish them well. Their fan base doesn't annoy me. As long as the fan base don't annoy me and the players don't annoy me. Jimmy annoys me a little bit. The whole like, I don't care about the Hall of Fame. It's like, bro,
Yeah,
you're doing too much.
that and Jokic pretty much just being like, I just want to go home. I don't really care. I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I felt about that. Like I wasn't upset about it, but it was just like, this is weird to me. It's just like I don't know.
So I feel like with Jimmy, it's a little bit of an act. I do. But I could be wrong. And so that's why I just feel like you're doing the most. Okay. But let's talk about these Nuggets. We no more time talking about the
All right,
losers,
all
but
right.
we spent the time on the losers because we want to get them out the way quickly, right? So let's talk about the Nuggets. With Jokic, at least for now, I'm gonna say I genuinely think like that's just him in the moment. What I am tired of is the media constantly talking about it and asking questions, in my opinion, to get that sort of I don't care response so they can then gush all over the fact that he doesn't care about these things. And, I've seen like even articles and headlines like trying to make it like like an American thing versus foreign thing. And I'm just like, ain't Jimmy been saying all fucking series he don't care about, like, and also Steph and the board, like people have been saying these things. Like he's not the first player to do it. And I said this on TV, and someone in the comments was like, the difference is Steph Curry showboats. And I'm like, oh, so he's entertaining on the court.
Right.
It's like there's this push to want to paint him as like, I guess, the most selfless, unique, player in some way. And I'm just like, that's fine, but like, let's not try to make it a country's thing, because we for damn sure know Luca care about his stats, and we know that,
And
and
Luka
all that,
going dance and shimmy and all that type of stuff too.
right? So it was just, and you got Giannis who's out there crowning himself king. So like, let's not,
Right.
whatever, So I just was like, okay. I mean, it was funny to me The one that was funny to me was the no, I gotta go home. Like that was like the funniest to me.
Mhm.
Just like for anyone who I don't know how anyone hasn't seen this video, but when Jokic found out what day the parade was and it was Thursday, he like really had like a meltdown because
Right.
he's ready to leave and go home to his country.
Right.
So it was just sort of hilarious. I don't know when he thought the parade's gonna be though. It's like what the next day? Like when did you think?
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think like him sort of like expressing he doesn't care or not seeming so into it, to your point, Justin, is like a little different for us and like to process because then what are you playing for? Like, what is like all of this about? And
Right.
for some, that may be really great. I think there's people who are really trying to sell us on like, see, look, he has like so much personality, but like I don't know that that's what fans want to hear. And I'm not saying like he should be someone he isn't, but part of that, and I know Jokic doesn't care about being the face of the league,
Mm.
but for those who complain and want him to be, right, like you have to have a different kind of personality for that. And like to me, this kind of stuff only further demonstrates that
Right.
he doesn't have the personality to be that. Now people evolve and they change, and so um perhaps, he will, but that's sort of my takeaway from it.
No, I mean I agree as well. I think I was listening, I think to maybe Austin, I think it was Austin Rivers podcast, and he played with Jokic, and he was kind of saying the same thing. Like he, for one, he doesn't really want to be in the spotlight like that. He doesn't care to be. He doesn't care really for the individual accolades and glory and stuff like that. For two, his game itself isn't really like marketable to the masses, right? People who really love basketball can appreciate the things that he's able to do out there, and it's the little things like how good his touch is around the rim and how well timed and accurate his passes are and stuff like that. But the casual viewer wants to see like threes like Steph Curry or dunks like LeBron and Giannis, stuff like that. So you got those two things kind of working against him in terms of him being more discussed in the media and being the face of the league and stuff like that. And three, like, I mean, to be frank, his English isn't even like the best. You know what I mean? Like he can obviously speak English and speak fairly clearly, but like he's not like, like even Giannis out there, who Giannis can speak pretty much like he almost grew up in America, right? He just has an accent. Jokic, you can tell English is very much like his second language. So there are a lot of different things working against him being pushed
Justin,
in
by
the
the
media.
way, is not xenophobic because you know how people get like just saying something that's an actual fact. They're gonna be like, oh,
Right, right. I'm
like
definitely, yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, Jokic is
we're
one of
not
the,
saying that like that should be a thing, but we're like
it's
it
just
is a
how it
thing,
is. Yeah, it's
right?
just
It
like
is
I'm not
a
saying it's
thing.
right. Yeah, I'm not saying it's right. It's just how it is. And people saying like, oh, he needs to be pushed more in the media and the Nuggets and this and that. Like, sure, non-casual viewers who are really into the NBA are going to say that. Like, this is why people are kind of pushing back on the idea that he should be pushed more in the media and more popular and stuff like that. It's just like they're not things about him that are like typical to what has been popular in the past and what shows up kind of like even in the popularity numbers. Like people just aren't that much interested in a lot of what makes Jokic himself. And like I said, it's not anything that's bad. It's just it is what it is, right? So that's just kind of like my whole opinion on the whole like media and people trying to get more, or they're trying to do this outrage thing about how the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic have been discussed. It's just like they're going to talk about the Lakers all the time. They're going to talk about LeBron. They're going to talk about the Warriors and Steph all the time. Even Giannis isn't quite as marketable as those two players were, and it shows in sales and all that type of jersey numbers and viewership and all type of stuff too. It just is what it is.
let's talk about data for a second because people love analytics, right? I love data because data, this is why people say like it's data, so it just is. And I'm just like, people can manipulate data and use it to tell whatever story they want. So, first of all, let's talk about the whole ratings thing, which I haven't seen what the ratings were for game 5. But game 4 had record low ratings. Like so
Wow.
people were going on about like, oh, the first 2 games, like, oh, I thought it wasn't gonna be this and blah 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 blah. And then game 4, it was record low ratings, like record low ratings. Like they hadn't had ratings that low since like going back to
In the
before the
2000s.
10s, before the 10s, right?
Yeah.
So, I just sort of chuckled because even with the ratings being up over the first 3 games, right? They were close to what the Warriors, so like the totals won't average the same because they had the low ratings in that game 4, and then I don't know how it's going to be for 5. So it ultimately is probably going to still definitely be under, unless for some reason game 5 had like an exceptional amount of ratings, and I my guess is that it probably didn't, right?
Mhm.
So one, to me, what's notable, because if you actually look at the ratings over like a 10-year period versus like just the last 5 years, because we know that the bubble year and then the year after that, like they were outliers. Now some would want to just attribute that all to like COVID and some of that, but I do think also the teams and who played a factor in that too. So I think it's more than one thing. But so last year with the Celtics was sort of like it was like a rebound year, right? So it's still like that Celtics series didn't reach the highs of like the Warriors past series.
Mhm.
Toronto is the only one that's interesting because while that's lower than like the Cavs, I actually think Toronto probably was on par with those others because we couldn't get the ratings from
Yeah.
Canada. Like
Mhm.
it may have even exceeded it because that was a whole ass country watching, right?
Mhm.
Um, but the Celtics Warriors didn't get the same level as like their past series. And that's why I always laughed when people said, "Oh, if it's Warriors, if it's Lakers Celtics." I'm like, "But the Celtics, the only game where the Celtics were like a top rated game was a game 7, right? Like
Mhm.
which is a different thing. They weren't carrying the ratings like that either. So, this idea that just because they're the Celtics and the history of them, or same thing with the Knicks, their ratings were not like anything special. So to me, that's like honestly, if you didn't have the Warriors in that series, it probably wouldn't have had great, like even sort of decent ratings. It was Steph who carried that to the extent that he did. Now, when you combine Steph with LeBron, that's when you get like those really, really big ratings, right? Whether he's on the Cavs or whatever team he's with. So it's like people, to me, in my opinion, were being like, when they say, oh, look, it matched, it was close to last year's Warriors. It's like, yeah, but last year's Warriors were like, it was good coming off of the 2 COVID years, but it still was lower
Mhm.
than before. And this one is, and is going to end up being lower, I think, when you look at that like game 4 dip. So it's just like more like contextualizing. But to me, the ratings look like what I expected, which was like they'll probably be somewhere in the middle. Like it won't be like the worst,
Mhm.
but it won't be the highest. And like that's to be, expected. So that's the thing about ratings. Some of this other revisionism, or maybe not revisionism, but the way that people are just like saying things to fit like, their narrative, it's like very annoying because like a lot of the points you brought up about, Jokic and, because this whole idea of if you just promote him, it will happen, right? Like there's truth to that, but it's a balancing act. Like people just seem to be of the belief that if you just keep saying something is great, something is good, if you just keep telling people that eventually they're going to accept it and believe it. And on some level they will, like no one's gonna like that I'm saying this, but I do feel like that was one of the ingenious things that LeBron and his camp did with the media, right?
Mhm.
Like, yes, he is an all-time great, but they also made it so that when the GOAT conversation happens, it's framed that like you can only consider LeBron.
Right, right.
And I want to say this because Justin actually ranks LeBron pretty highly, right? So this is I don't. I rank him highly, but I don't rank him second. So I think it's still high, but others will have like a conniption because he's done such a marvelous job, him and his camp, in the way that they push things to the media, that it's just like, you should only consider LeBron a second. And how dare you consider anyone else, right? But part of the reason why that was also effective is because of all the shit LeBron James did on the court, right? And so, like, yeah, we can just tell people Giannis is great because this was the thing with Giannis too. They said he wasn't marketed, and he wasn't, and the league could have done better. But there's still also a limit, right? Until you win, there's a limit on how much the marketing will help and do. And then even when we fully market, there's you having the likability, the appeal, the markability, whatever you want to call it, but you like those other factors have to come in, or there's going to be a cap on how much the promotion and marketing can do. There's an element of like people just have to really like the player, And I always go back to John Morant and Steph as examples because the league wanted to lean into Zion. That's we ain't gonna get into Zion and his shenanigans, but Zion had a lot going on lately.
Wow,
But
wow.
the league wanted to lean into Zion, right? Like that's who they wanted to lean into. But Ja was just a force. And like I know the league is annoyed. We're gonna get some John news coming soon at some point, but like because he don't know how to act. He don't know how to act.
Neither one of them do.
One thinks he's a fake gangster, and the other one has a obsession with porn stars. So and by the way, I'm not trying to like judge sex workers. Like that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like
he does.
Yeah, right. Obviously, clearly. So but that's not the thing that the league wants out there, right? So that's their judgment, that's their value call, that's their whatever. So, but same thing with Steph. Like they were talking about Kyrie, like they were talking about other guys, other point guards. It wasn't Steph.
Right.
It wasn't Steph, right? And even when it should have been Steph, they leaned into Kevin Durant once he came into the Warriors, right? It really wasn't until he was away, essentially, and they saw how bad things got that it started to become a like, because Kevin Durant left and Steph came back, and what do you know? Ratings were like up around the league, right? And Kevin Durant led teams weren't producing the same results. So people sometimes don't even look at what the data is telling them because they have in their own mind. I know I work at a network and people just be like, oh, if you just like talk about LeBron and the Lakers, people are going to care. Not as much anymore. Not as much anymore. These younger generations, they're into Ja. They're still into Steph. Like this generation coming up, they grew up on Steph.
Right.
Jamal Murray had Steph in his top 5.
Facts.
What's the other one? D'Angelo Russell. He has said Steph is in his top 5. I've heard De'Aaron Fox. I don't know if he said Steph's in the top 5, but speak very highly of him, right? Like not everyone is on the LeBron. And I'm not saying that they don't think LeBron's a great player, but like we've heard a number of players, like younger guys who like, kind of come in the league like, oh yeah, like Steph was my favorite player. Steph, right? So this younger generation, the way a lot of people in the media right now kind of grew up on Bron, this younger generation grew up on Steph. So it's interesting because I heard some of my colleagues today they normally do football, but everyone's watching the NBA finals. And they were talking about the NBA doesn't really have like a guy like that. Like we're kind of transitioning from the LeBron and Steph era, but there's not really a guy who's like the spokesperson, and like Jokic can't really be that. And so like, yeah, they're like in transition. That's it. In transition. Like I just laugh, Justin, when everyone keeps saying like they need to find their next. Like until Steph retires, you don't need to find shit next because like he's your guy and he's been here.
Facts. And I mean, and when it's that time, it'll happen organically. You don't have to force it and try to push guys and that really don't even want to be in that position, and they just don't naturally, like, it'll be obvious who the next one is when it happens, right? It shouldn't be somebody like, oh, let's pick this guy and then make him the face. Like that, like you just said, they didn't do that with Steph. Steph made himself that level of guy, just with his play and the amount of attention he grabbed, and then his fandom and all his popularity built organically. And then boom, you have a guy like that. Even LeBron as well, when it was his time. It's just going to happen, even though they were pushing LeBron before he even got to the NBA, but it was because of those other things.
Right. Like if LeBron didn't achieve some of the stuff, it wouldn't have worked. But there was yes. Like his was a very manufactured push, which is what like annoyed some people. Whereas I do feel like Jordan, MJ, Magic, Bird, those to me, and look, I'm young. I was young at the time of those guys. So maybe I'm misremembering things, but I don't feel like they had to be pushed. It was like, Magic Bird, Magic Bird, Magic Bird,
Right.
And then when it was Kobe, Shaq, whoever, if you want to say those guys were sort of like, to me, those were all like natural. I mean, Kobe wasn't a number one pick, he didn't, right? It sort of happened organically. And so I agree with you. I think you have to let it happen organically. I don't know who it's going to be. They've been trying to push Luka on us for years, and it hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened because Luka hasn't done anything yet. I mean, he got to the Western Conference Finals. Shout out to him. But, every year we come back from the season and he's a top person to win MVP for the betting odds. And, it's like, why?
Who knows?
And I actually love that Jokic is, getting this respect. The Denver Nuggets are the betting favorites. But this same courtesy was not extended to the Warriors. So this is the part, Justin, where people can say I'm a hater. But this is why the dynasty talk fucking annoys the shit out of me. Right. And also, this propaganda, I'm sorry. This is the part where it's going to be like, whatever, hot takes, if you want to call it hot. But this propaganda of trying to frame this Nuggets run like it's the most magnificent postseason juggernaut dominant fucking run of all goddamn time. Let me tell you something. That shit is irking me more than not that they won, not any of that. It's this now framing of trying to make them into something they're not, right? And everybody's saying like, oh, because they won, they proved everyone wrong. Not really, right? But if y'all like, and I'm going to be real, I also sort of get annoyed by Warriors fans, Lakers fans, everyone keeps saying like, oh, this should have been us, or it's like, bro, like it just sounds silly. Like do what you want, but it's just like, it's their time.
Right.
We would laugh and mock the same people who would say, oh, you didn't see this team. So it's just like, they won, celebrate them, let them have their time. I'm not going to fight you if you call Jokic the best in the world. None of those things, but like, nah, you're not selling me on this being the beginning of a dynasty, which we touched on a little bit, but let's dig into that. You're not selling me on this being the beginning of a dynasty. You're not selling me on this being a juggernaut that won 53 games. That's like normally a 5 seed or whatever it is. 4 seed maybe.
3-4. Yeah, Warriors 153 last year. They were third.
That was last year. But I'm just saying teams that we think of as like that was last year in a year where Steph was out, this person was out. Jokic played the whole goddamn season.
Right.
It's like,
And the Warriors were a 3 seed. They weren't number 1 with the 53 wins. You typically need more than 53 wins to be a 1 seed. You got to be pushing
yes,
50.
yes.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, you're not convincing me. Like, oh, they were the best team in the league all season. Yes, among a bunch of mid. They were
Right.
the best team all season amongst a bunch of mid,
Mm.
right? And so if your position and argument is that none of the other teams will improve, then sure. But I don't think that's the case, right? And so it
Right.
doesn't mean the Nuggets can't get back there, but let's they're
Let's
12
see
and
it now.
3. That's dominant. No, dominance is only losing one game. Dominance is
Mhm.
not like having to go
Mm.
like toe to toe with the Timberwolves.
Mhm.
And I get it. They swept the Lakers, but those games could have all flipped and gone a different way.
Yeah.
The Suns were able to take y'all to 6 games, right? In my opinion, the Heat series should have at least been the Heat almost won last night, and they had
Right.
other games they could have won, right? So yes, but still, like 12 and 3, is that what it is? It's a very good postseason run, no doubt. But
Mhm.
but who did you play? Like the Heat played much better teams than you guys had to go up against. And that's why I laugh, because I hear Nuggets fans say, you know, oh, like y'all are saying if the Celtics and all these people got here, they would have beat us. But like, didn't the Bucks lose to an 8 seed? Okay, but then you beat an 8 seed. So like that
Mhm.
cuts both ways. Like if you're downplaying the fact that the Bucks lost to the Heat, why does that make your championship so great that you beat the Heat?
Yeah. Nah, I feel you. It's it's like, sure, you can say their run was dominant. Like you said, it was the field was a little bit different. I would say, and we can go to all the historical markers, right? I think they had the worst defense of any NBA champion in NBA history.
They didn't have a top 10 defense, and
They
they
did
would
not
be
have.
like, I think maybe the 4th team in NBA history to have that. But
I want
the
to say
late
they're
the
15th.
Lakers, it was the Warriors, but that year for the Warriors were 11th, so they were just outside of the top 10.
Mhm.
I forget who the other team is. They're either the 4th or the 5th.
Right. And the thing about the playoffs, and I said this on Twitter the other day, but I was really talking about individual players. But even for teams, you have to understand that when you're in the playoffs, you're not necessarily playing the numbers, right? So, like in a vacuum, they don't have an elite defense by any stretch of the imagination. But based on matchup, they could get away with that this run. You can't guarantee that you're going to get the perfect matchups for your defense to be able to survive through 4 rounds in the playoffs for multiple years in a row, right? By all means, this run this season, great run. They lost 4 games total. That's amazing, right? They were in a ton of close games. They end up winning those, so that can shift the narrative a little bit. If they lost 2 close games, then it's 16-6 instead of 16-4. Is it that much different? But like I said, this run right here, cool. But when you project years in the future and say they're just going to run through the league, essentially, you're pretty much saying they're setting themselves up to be a dynasty. They're going to be right back here next year. It's like you got to take into consideration all these other factors, right? What was their path? How dominant truly were they in the regular season and the postseason? Like, what was the margin of victory? Were they blowing teams out in the playoffs on the way to a chip? Like 2017 Warriors had like a 12. They had a ridiculous point differential in the playoffs, let alone in the regular season. They were not only did they sweep the first 3 rounds and only lost 1 game in the finals, they were obliterating teams in the playoffs. The Nuggets won 3 close games against the Lakers, and then one of the games was kind of like a 10-point victory or something like that. But if LeBron jumper ain't broke in the fourth quarter, they could have lost a few of those games. So I'm just not looking at it like they're so dominant. Like, by all means, give them their credit. They won a championship, but I'm not looking like, oh my God, how do the Warriors beat? How does any team beat them next year? They're a beatable team.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a ridiculous discussion. And like, look, like, yeah, shout out to Miami. They had like a little magical run. But Miami,
they not that, like, nobody even expected them to win their first round series. I think once they got to the Knicks, it was like, okay, they can probably beat the Knicks because nobody expected the Knicks to get to the second round. So it was supposed to be the Bucks and Cleveland in the second round. So it's like, okay, the two teams we didn't expect to get there are getting there. So the Heat are probably better than them. Then we didn't expect them to beat the Celtics, and we definitely didn't expect them to beat the Nuggets. They had a nice little Cinderella run, but let's be for real. They weren't good. They weren't a great team. They were a really good team that got hot at the right time, and they ran into an actual good team and lost.
and then the one team that had a player who is not on Jokic's level, but is just underneath him, that team took them 6 games.
Right.
And the Suns are not even, because like I don't consider, like, I know who LeBron James is, but we know LeBron is not like that player anymore, like on a night-to-night basis. And
Right.
Anthony Davis isn't
For sure. That
Kevin
level of
Durant.
player.
He's not that right. So that's what I'm saying. It's just like the one team that had a guy that was close to your level, they took y'all 6 games.
Yep. I mean, and I don't want to go through each of their, like, kind of do the whole narrative thing about like this, like you just said before, like, because teams did the same, people did the same thing to the Warriors,
Right.
but you still have to contextualize things. You still have to provide, like, information about what actually happened. And when people were, like I said, are talking about how good they're going to be in the future and how they're just going to keep running through the league, you have to understand they did lose a game to Minnesota. Minnesota was missing Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels. These are 2 starting caliber players for their team who are also pretty important to their defense, right? You play Phoenix in the second round. You lose 2 games to Phoenix. Phoenix has 2 players that are kind of in that upper echelon of player that you would need to beat a team like Denver. And the rest of the team is full of scrubs. And the third and fourth best player ended up injured by the end of the series. Then you play the Lakers. In shot variance, whatever, luck is on your side, whatever. They win 3 extremely close games in those series, pretty much 3 1-possession games. So just like they swept them, they could have been down 1-3. Right? If one shot goes the Lakers' way and it doesn't go the Nuggets' way, that could have happened that way. Obviously, it
And
didn't.
by the way,
They were
we were
better
not
team than
rooting
they
for
weren't.
that. We
Oh
wanted
yeah,
the
we
Lakers to
definitely
lose.
weren't.
But
But
it's just,
yeah, you just got to acknowledge that it wasn't as dominant as people are trying to make it seem, and it doesn't project as being that dominant in the future. You can't project a dynasty.
no, and by the way, the reason I am doing this is because yes, it was done to the Warriors. And I said this earlier today on TV because I was like asked the question. I said, like, honestly, I don't really want to come on here and like cast like,
Yeah, no asterisks. We're not putting asterisks on.
yeah, because I definitely don't, but also because like I didn't like that either. That like when the Warriors won, everybody was like questioning it. But the reason I'm doing this because is the dynasty talk and the, like the Warriors were not, even after they won, favored. The Cavaliers and I believe the Spurs were both favored over them. They may have been third.
For 2016.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That changed obviously over the course of 2016. But they had 167 blasted games.
Right.
They had this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm just like, this team, when you said the traditional markers, I'm like, they don't have the traditional. So when y'all start talking about this and say, oh, like, we think they could be like the Warriors, y'all are not displaying. The Warriors were a top 1 defense.
Yes. They were like ridiculously good on both ends of the court. They were.
I'm just like, these are not the markers of a team that's being set up to have like this long extended run.
Right.
And then I also there's like the other thing that's irking me is how people are misremembering the Warriors' history because people didn't basically watch the Warriors. So the way the Denver Nuggets story is trying to be sold and told, like they're this team that built and they did it differently than all the others, and they didn't. I'm not denying Kevin Durant got to the team, but the Warriors won their first championship and got back to the finals and won 73 games with guys that they drafted and developed.
4 starters were drafted by the Warriors. 3 starters on the Nuggets were drafted by the Nuggets right now. Right.
And the only free agent they had at that time was Andre Iguodala. And excuse me, but a core part of the people that helped Denver win were trades or free agents. So you're not different in that regard. Aaron Gordon was traded to your team. Bruce Brown, KCP was traded too, right?
KCP was traded there.
And then Brown was was he traded or was a free agent? Yeah.
Free agent.
So it's like all key pieces to your team,
right?
You know, and like, I mean, really key in what transpired. So that is not unique. And then I'm sorry, but you're not going to. The Warriors didn't like it. It was free agency, and they had cap. And the Denver Nuggets would have done the same fucking thing if they had money to sign a player and Kevin Durant was available and on the market. They would go and try to get him and have him on their team. But the Warriors are a team, and then Kevin Durant has left. And then they went back and they won again with their core, and only the addition of Andrew Wiggins, a player who no one wanted, but also was done in a trade, but a player who no team wanted, and the Warriors were mocked for taking. So this, like, oh, the Denver, you know, the 7 years. Stephen Curry did not come into the league in the 2013-2014 season. And the Warriors' first finals came after years. Like, Steph had been there, Clay had been there, and by the time Draymond got there and was in his starting role, you know, but I mean, they were first going to the playoffs. Like, Dre went to the playoffs in his first year, but he wasn't even Draymond Green yet. So by the time they actually won in 2016, so I'm just like, this revisionism.
It's crazy.
It's getting on my nerves because
we do sound like haters, but the thing is, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care either. I don't care either. And it's like you said, because people are, it's like everything, and it just becomes clear year after year after year that people just don't like the Warriors because of the way they discuss other teams that do similar things to the Warriors and how the difference in discussion is, right? It's so, oh my God, look at Denver, the way they did it. Look at Jokic dynasty. When the Warriors do it, it's like, look who they played. It's just like trying to downplay everything the Warriors do, but upplay everything everybody else does, even though the Warriors have already done it 3-4 times over. That's where it gets annoying.
And look, I get the difference with the Jokic, because at the end of the day, he actually is an analytics darling, but he also is a stat darling in the way that many people consume the NBA, which is triple doubles, points, assist, rebounds, right? So because he actually can appeal to both, people are like, look at all the, because it's not actually people talking about his analytics. I mean, the analytics people do, but they're just like, all the triple doubles, and he's tallied the most points ever or led for the entire playoffs, and they're using the traditional stats, right?
Yeah.
And it's because and Steph has never been a tradition, like he does, like I'm saying, but
it hasn't been as gaudy,
right? They're not gaudy, and so people need it to be gaudy like that for them to comprehend the greatness. So I do get why they're sort of like, oh yes, Jokic, and yes, he's clear, because Steph has never gotten that. Even after last year, not everyone it was still like, oh, Giannis is the best player, but
right.
I've never ever thought Giannis was over Steph. It, like, that was one that always irked me. Like, I still am gonna have Steph as the best player, but I totally am okay with you saying Jokic is the best player. I was never okay with people saying Giannis was the best player. I always thought he was a little below Steph. I really did.
And I think he is. still, I was having this conversation with a few buddies earlier today about who we consider to be the best player. And my general thought towards that is it's really a conversation between just Steph and Jokic at this point. But even if you want to throw Giannis in there, there's nobody else really into that conversation. And it comes down to preference, really, and whose year it is. Like 2021, it was Giannis's year. For different circumstances, it could be what type of team you got, are your players around you injured, all that type of stuff. Your path to the finals, all that. 2022 was Steph's year. 2023 is just Jokic's year, right? So, but at the end of the day, I think Giannis has some offensive shortcomings that just put him a notch below Steph and Jokic when it really gets down to the nitty gritty in the playoffs. You need a guy that's going to be able to get you a shot really from anywhere on the court against the elite defenses of the NBA, and Giannis just cannot do that individually. So even though he can do a lot of things defensively that they can't even dream about doing, offense ultimately matters a little bit more. And that's really the separator for me. But yeah, I agree. Giannis ain't really on Steph level, and it's because of that offense gap right there.
Yeah, I know. I've been saying that, been on that, and I was like, "Oh, Natalie's a hater." She did, and I'm just like, bro, like if you cannot, I'm sorry, like if you cannot go to your best player at the end of games, like if you cannot, you're not convincing me he's the best player in the league. I'm just sorry.
Right.
It was never okay with me. Like no matter what other fucking justification people tried to give me, that was not acceptable to me. And they had to go to Middleton to close. I'm not saying that Giannis never closed out games for them, but like it was their preference and their thing to go to Middleton. And and people will want to bring up the KD years with the Warriors, and like to me, it's just like the Warriors were stupid. Meaning, like, I'm not saying that Kevin Durant is not a good option to go to. I'm saying that they incorrectly assessed a lot of things when it came to having both of those two guys on the team, right? Like, you had a coach who has old school philosophies, and he thought Kevin Durant was their best player.
Yeah. I mean, I think Steph also didn't want KD to kind of do the whole KD thing. Ultimately, inevitably, it was going to happen regardless. But I think he's always been comfortable taking a step back, even for non-superstar players, to make them feel a little bit more comfortable and he can get his game off and stuff like that. But I think getting back to your original point about the stats, like Steph's stats in the finals, there was some post today about like which finals MVP, like ranked the last 6 finals MVPs. And I put Steph first, but if you look at the graphic, they showing the stats. Like everybody else's stats is crazy on there. Like Jokic 30-point triple double, Giannis 30-point pretty much triple double, and I'm like, well, regardless of the stats, you look at the performance and who it was against. Steph has to be his performance. His Finals MVP has to be the best Finals MVP of the last 6 years. When you factor in played against the number 1 defense, essentially bent them to his will, and the depoy of the year was his primary matchup, and he lit them on fire, right? When you look at, okay.
And also, we all saw like who Steph was playing with last year. I'm sorry, but like
that too, right?
Like, come on, like what?
There was no Jamal Murray.
Andrew Wiggins was in the finals the second leading scorer, and I love Wiggs, so I don't mean that as a compliment, but he didn't even average 20 points. Like, what are we doing? Jamal Murray was averaging 20 points and assisting his ass off out there. Like, come on. And that's the other thing. Could we gonna stop downplaying like Jokic's help? Right? We gonna stop. You had Brown. I don't mean Bruce Brown. I'm talking about the other Brown, Christian Brown, show up in a fucking game and do what he did. Yeah, Bruce Brown. You had Aaron Gordon, right? Like, those are some of the role players. Let's not talk about playoff riser Jamal Murray, which is what he is. He's a playoff riser.
He's I don't know what he.
And to me, that really to me is the difference in what the Nuggets can do. And when I say that, meaning like, yeah, he may continue to be a playoff riser, but I will start to look at them as a juggernaut if you're getting this Jamal Murray over the course of like a regular season too.
Right. If this is just him, he's pretty much a top 10 player in the league.
Exactly.
And if you got arguably the best player in the league and another guy that's also top 10 in the league, then you're reaching some levels of performance that's pretty hard to beat. But we don't think that's what the case is.
So, to be honest, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. He hasn't done it yet, but like, there's also there's justifiable things to argue, reasonable arguments for why he didn't. He's been injured. He was a younger player before. So to me, next year is the test for Jamal Murray. And like, I don't mean it as like, I hope he does do well, but I think that has to be a real thing for them to be
a dynasty.
Yeah. Yes. So that's my only caveat to this. I still just think with the CBA, like all these things, I don't think, they're going to be winning 3 of the next 4 and 5 and all this shit people are saying. But I do think Jamal Murray is the key. Like, if he's going to be a top 10 player, which, Draymond Green for a portion of the run was a top 10 player in the NBA, and what would you say Klay was? Top 20? Or would you say top 15?
He was like top 20, top 25. Yeah. And I would probably put Dre top 15. On the high end, he was top 10. Like 2016, when they won 73 games, he was top 10 impact for sure. So yeah, and that year I would probably put Klay top 25 or something like that. It's a lot of good players in the league. So
yeah, so I mean, it's just like, but if Jamal Murray is going to be that, then that's and so I mean, I think he'll probably finally get his first All-Star next year because he's gonna have like the finals behind him, and
right,
so people are gonna want to give him one. But people love to do this. Oh, he didn't. No All-Stars. Like,
yeah.
Like Jamal Murray, what he did, what he gave, honestly, is a better performance sometimes than what Klay Thompson has done in the postseason.
I mean, what Jamal Murray did this postseason was MVP level stuff. Like, so the fact that he didn't make an All-Star team in the regular season is pretty irrelevant, considering who on their run outplayed him from any other team. Devin Booker, who was playing out of his mind. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know. Anthony Edwards, 2 All-Stars, right? You can say Devin Booker's close to being a superstar. So, I mean, the whole no All-Star thing is like, come on, man. Like, look.
And for me with Jamal Murray, it was more about what he did in the games when his shot wasn't falling. It feels like he's evolved. Mm-hmm. Whereas before it was like, if you contained his scoring, you pretty much sort of contained him. So I do think he's going to be a better player next year. I just don't know if he's going to be a top 10 player. And so we will see, to be determined. But yeah, that's why, like I said, call me hater. I don't give a fuck. But this premature crowning, and, I do get it. I get why Warriors fans are annoyed, because this is like, we always out here fighting for Steph. Like, why Steph can't get, the same respect. But I'm not going to do that now to be like, oh, yeah, like, it should have been like the Warriors didn't handle their business, so they were not playing in the finals. So that's that.
I'm not going to come on here and say they would have beat the Nuggets if we saw them and all that type of stuff. But they can beat them next year.
Right. Right. And like this, like, because also it's like with like they're like everything's going to run through them, and like, I'm sorry, like, you need another year of the Warriors maybe not doing something before we can have those kinds of talks. Like, because when the Bucks missed out, and yes, I know they're going to say there was an injury, but when the Bucks missed out, it was like, oh, okay, now they're going to come back. It's going to be their year. People expected the Bucks to win the championship this year.
Right. It was not, oh, the Celtics beginning. It's the Celtics about to run the East. Celtics was right back in the Eastern Conference Finals too. But
right, it was the Bucks are gonna win. It was the Bucks would have won it all if Middleton was there and they had to face the Warriors, right? Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, people like are sort of like, man, the Warriors were not even that great. So yes, Steph's Finals MVP has to be.
And you're proving the point. It's like people extend grace to all these other teams in a way that they wouldn't even think about extending it to the Warriors. In fact, they do the opposite with the Warriors. They devalue everything the Warriors do. They devalue everything Steph does, and they prop up everything every other star does, and they prop up everything every other team that isn't the Warriors does. So, of course, it's going to create a lot of annoyed, salty Warriors fans.
Right, which is why I'm just like, first of all, I'm so tired of like relitigating MVP. Embiid did enough to win MVP, and I'm like, and like, no, what Jokic did this postseason doesn't make everyone look silly because he did what the fuck people said. Like, prove it, go do it. And I don't see why people have such an issue with that. Like, people are like, just because that's been done in the past, like, two wrongs don't make it right. Like, it's not wrong. It's not wrong to say, in my opinion, it is not wrong to be like, yeah, no, like, we got to see him do it.
Right.
And yes, I know that, like, his teammates were hurt and all that. I understand that. I do. But there were also questions about his teammates and team. So I wasn't convinced that just because they came back, they would win.
I definitely think if you flip this year and last year, like, let's say he wins the MVP last year and they win the championship last year, he probably wins 3 MVPs in a row. But it doesn't mean Embiid's MVP case is invalidated. It doesn't mean he didn't have he had an MVP caliber season. But I also think a lot of the basis behind Jokic not winning 3 in a row was the fact that it's like that is rarefied air for certain players, and to crown a player that way when he hasn't at least
even made the finals, which was my point. I wouldn't even care if he lost. Like, if Jokic lost this year, I wouldn't even care. It was just like, can they make the finals? Can they?
Right.
And people are acting like, oh my God, like, this is, I'm like, if y'all want to say he's on the level of LeBron and Steph, we get to hold him to the same standard that we hold them to.
Right. And we had literally just watched the whole voter fatigue thing happen to Giannis before.
Yes!
People were saying, like, he didn't win a chip yet, so, like, we're not about to give him 3 straight MVPs and all this other stuff. So, it is what it is. Voting someone for MVP doesn't mean that they're the best player in the league. There's plenty of people.
I've never ever thought Embiid was a better player than Jokic, ever.
Right. So, yeah, that's we don't need to relitigate that at all.
No, we don't. But I will say this too, because I hate when people change arguments to fit their narrative. Because it was like, it would always be like, we all talking about Jokic in the postseason, but what has Embiid done? Most players who have won their first MVP haven't won or gotten to the finals before they do. So to me, like, that was like, I can guarantee you Embiid is probably not going to be an MVP again until he does something, right? And it's not going to take winning 2 or almost 3 for people to hold that against him, right? Like, so, like, that's the thing. It's like, okay, now we've given you 1. You need to prove that, whatever. And that's what people always do. So the other thing around that whole MVP conversation, and still with Jokic people, is they talk like he was entitled to it. Like, he was clear of the field and no one else deserved it. And I just feel very strongly, like, particularly last year, that he should not have won. Like, to me, there's a very legitimate argument that last year's was Embiid's, which is another reason I was also okay with Embiid winning. Like, I know people say, like, oh, it should be just based on the season, but it's never just based on the season. It's never just based on the regular season. There are other factors that people always take into account and into play. And you know me, whether people agree with it or not, Justin, I'm consistent. I don't believe in no fucking 6 seed winning no goddamn MVP. Like, it's stupid to me, right? And so the first year, I thought it could have been Jokic and I thought it could have been Embiid. I don't think either one of them cleared each other. And I was totally fine with Jokic winning, and all the Embiid people tried to hate on Jokic. And I was like, no, I think it's fine. Last year, I did not think Jokic deserved to win. This year, I think Jokic had the traditional MVP argument. Best player, best team, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was there. But I also think that Joel Embiid had a very good argument. I think that Giannis also had a very good argument. There were 3 people that had very good arguments, and any of them could have won. And so, when people just say like he should have 3, he could also just have 1 or none. Because there's no years that he cleared.
Right.
There's no years that he cleared.
But people are gonna sell that. They're gonna say that he's clear of the field going into next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he's an MVP favorite going into next season. And that's just, it is what it is when you win, I guess.
Right. And I mean, he should be an MVP favorite. So I'm not gonna but we'll see how they treat everyone else. Because I mean, they had the Warriors way low in the betting odds, which
I saw that too.
I just think that's crazy because I get it that the Warriors did not look great this year, but a team 1 year removed from a championship should not, especially because Lakers were favored in the Lakers series.
Mm-hmm.
They 1 year removed from a championship should not have you below the Suns.
Especially when the core from that championship team is still intact.
Right, like what? The Suns made it to the second round and won 6 games. The Warriors made it to the second round and won 6 games with the Lakers. Why the fuck are the Suns? Why the fuck are the Suns favored over the Warriors?
Who knows? They got 2 players worse than Steph on their team, no depth, and they're about to waive Chris Paul off their team.
I mean, it's just honestly, Justin, it is remarkable to me. It is truly, truly remarkable to me, Justin. Some of the things that I see. Let's close on this. What I hope, Justin, and what I believe, because we know the Warriors take everything as a slight. And there's no way that I believe if we are offended.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the dynasty talk just isn't the media. And it isn't just, Twitter. It is Michael Malone.
Mike got a big mouth on him. I like it though.
I like it too. But it's him. It's Jamal Murray. We ain't gonna stop. And I'm trying to remember because again, I don't have a problem with people who talk and back up their shit. And the Nuggets did that this postseason. I always remembered early, the Warriors being like, yeah, we want more. We're hungry. But I don't remember them declaring themselves, And he didn't declare them a dynasty. But I just don't remember them mentioning the word dynasty after their first win. Mm-hmm. I remember them having a chip on their shoulder because people acted like their chip was a fluke. So they came out and did it on the court. But they didn't start to talk about we gonna get some more and all that. So they had stacked a few.
Yeah. Maybe Draymond, but other than that, no.
So it's just, okay. Everyone talking about the beginning of the dynasty. I'm like, all right. Y'all also said that about the Bucks just 2 years ago.
Right.
Bucks ain't been back since.
Every team that wins a championship, people go into the next season saying, oh, they're just going to win another one, except for the Warriors.
Except for the Warriors. Except for the Warriors. And the thing about it is people just think it's like, oh, we're going to have all our players. Okay. Well, the thing about being a dynastic team and the thing about repeating and the thing about getting back to the finals over and over is you make deep postseason runs. You play way more games than everybody else. And that shit is going to take a toll on your body.
Yeah. And just like all the dynastic teams find a way to get better after each championship. That's what makes you a dynasty. we've already mentioned the CBA rules and all that type of stuff, and how hard it's going to be to continue to add talent to teams that are already over the cap and in the luxury tax and all that type of stuff. So it has to come from some type of internal development, because they're not going to get any free agents or anything like that. Maybe a big trade, but you can't project that type of stuff. So what is their path to getting significantly better year in and year out to keep beating the field, who keeps gearing up to beat you after every year? You can rest assured that the field this year is gearing up to beat Denver. And like, if you aren't significantly better next year than you were this year, chances are you could get beat. You probably will get beat.
They're beatable.
They're already beatable.
Do you think the Suns walked away from that series feeling like we can't beat this team without a few changes?
Right. They probably think, man, we probably some health and some competent rotational players away. We playing a bunch of fringe NBA players next to Steph. I mean, that's not Steph, next to KD and Book, and we still took 2 games off these dudes. I'm sure the Lakers are thinking,
we haven't played a few games together.
And we ain't played no time together. I'm sure the Lakers are thinking, man, if LeBron jumper wasn't broken in the fourth quarter, we probably could have won a few of these games. Didn't he miss the game winner for game 4 or something like that? Game time shot. Something like that. It was one possession games. You know, I'm sure the Warriors are looking at it like, man, we were right there with the Lakers. And if we played Denver, who knows how that would have went? We probably a piece or two or just some type of tweaks away as well. So we'll see.
We will see. We will see. As always, the hope is that players remain healthy, teams remain healthy, and we can just see what happens. Because obviously, there's a Warriors pod, so we're going to talk about the Warriors. But there are other teams, you know, like the Clippers, again, will try to do something. You know, and then, you know, there's the East. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with the Bucks, but Giannis is still over there. You know, the Celtics are going to try to do their thing. So it's just, it's going to be interesting and fascinating to see. But for now, we are in wait and see mode. So thank y'all for tuning in with us. It's late. That's why I'm yawning. Apologize on the East Coast, but we appreciate y'all as always. Make sure you are downloading, subscribe, telling a friend, sharing, leaving us a 5-star review and rating. Please do that. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Golden Spaces Pod. Anything else, Justin?
Nah. Yeah, let's keep it cute on Twitter.
Let's keep it cute on Twitter. Let's keep it cute, y'all. Until next time.